Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The first thing Elara Voss felt was heat, sharp, biting heat crawling across her face as the desert exploded around her. The second was humiliation. Not the kind that fades. The kind that brands you. She was on her knees behind a burned-out Hilux, arms wrapped around a crate of ammunition she was never meant to fire. Dust clung to her eyelashes. Blood, someone else's, spattered her sleeves. Ahead of her, a Navy SEAL lay crumpled in the open, his rifle just out of reach, his body twisted wrong. The radio screamed orders she wasn't allowed to answer. Then someone shouted, raw and furious, cutting through the gunfire. "Give me the rifle." Elara froze. The words weren't meant for her. They never were. Rounds snapped overhead like angry insects. The sky was a pale, merciless blue, empty of mercy or helicopters. Elara had been told to stay low, stay quiet, stay useful, but invisible. Ammunition runner. Mule. Not shooter. She pressed her back into the hot metal, heart hammering so loud she was sure the enemy could hear it. Ahead, Chief Petty Officer Rafe Calderon tried to crawl, fingers digging into sand, leaving a dark trail behind him. His breathing came in wet gasps. Every instinct in Elara screamed to move, but another voice, older, colder, reminded her of every time she'd been told she wasn't ready. Not trained enough. Not trusted. She tasted grit and copper and shame. Then Calderon's rifle slipped from his hand, landing close enough to touch. Close enough to change everything. A shadow fell over her. Lieutenant Harker loomed, eyes wild, jaw clenched beneath his helmet. He looked past her, through her, like she was part of the wreckage. "Ammo," he barked. Elara shoved the crate forward, hands shaking. He tore it open, cursed, fired blind. Then he saw Calderon. Saw the rifle. Saw her. His face hardened into something ugly. "What are you waiting for?" he snapped. She opened her mouth, words tangling. She wanted to say she couldn't. That she wasn't cleared. That she was just carrying ammunition. Another explosion punched the ground, closer this time. Calderon stopped moving. The silence around his body was louder than the gunfire. Harker swore. "Give me the rifle," he yelled again, this time looking straight at her. Time stretched thin. Elara's hands moved before her mind caught up. She grabbed the rifle. It was heavier than she expected, warm from Calderon's grip, the sling stiff with blood. The weight settled into her shoulder like a decision you can't undo. Her breath steadied, strange and calm, as if some locked door inside her had cracked open. She didn't hand it over. She rose. Slowly. The world narrowed to angles and distance and wind. She saw a glint on the ridge. A silhouette shifting wrong. Her finger found the trigger. "Elara!" Harker shouted, too late. The shot broke the air. And everything she was, shattered with it. 3 months earlier, Elara Voss stood at the edge of Camp Rook, watching the desert wake up. Dawn spread thin gold across the sand, turning razor wire into soft halos. She liked this hour because no one needed anything from her yet. No orders. No sideways looks. Just the quiet hum of generators and the smell of burnt coffee. She adjusted the strap of her pack, too heavy as always, and listened to laughter drifting from the firing line. The SEALs moved with easy confidence, rifles slung like extensions of their bodies. Elara had trained with them once, briefly, before the paperwork buried her. "Support only," they said. "You're valuable where you are." Valuable meant unseen. She told herself it was enough. She told herself a lot of things. Her road to Camp Rook had been narrow and mean. A childhood spent moving, a father who believed toughness was love, a mother who disappeared quietly one night and never came back. Elara learned early how to carry weight without complaining. She joined logistics because it was practical. Safe, they said. But safety never found her. In convoy after convoy she memorized terrain, wind, timing, things shooters studied, because knowing made her feel less helpless. She practiced at night with an old scope and a rusted bolt action borrowed from a sympathetic sergeant. She wasn't reckless. She was hungry. Still, when she asked for sniper qualification, the answer came fast and clean. Not yet. Maybe never. Chief Petty Officer Rafe Calderon noticed her because he paid attention to what others missed. He saw how she stacked ammo by caliber without looking. How she called distances right the first time. How her hands didn't shake under pressure. He never promised anything, just asked questions and listened to the answers. Sometimes he'd sit with her on overturned crates, sharing stories about mistakes that almost got him killed. "Fear's useful," he said once, tapping the side of his helmet. "It means you care about the outcome." When she laughed, surprised, he smiled like he'd won something. Rafe became a quiet thread in her days, steady, reassuring, dangerous in a way that made sense. Lieutenant Harker was the opposite. Sharp edges. Perfect records. He didn't like deviations. He didn't like Elara. He called her runner even when she corrected him. When she suggested better resupply routes, he ignored them, until they worked. When she warned about a ridge line that felt wrong, he waved it off. "Stick to your lane," he said, loud enough for others to hear. Elara swallowed the words burning her throat and went back to work. That night, the wind carried distant gunfire, and she lay awake imagining a different life, one where she wasn't told when to look away. Somewhere beyond the dark, a storm was forming. She felt it coming. She just didn't know it would ask her to choose. The mission briefing room smelled like sweat and marker ink. Maps were taped crooked on the walls, corners curling from the heat. Elara stood near the back, arms folded around her notebook, eyes tracking every route line Harker drew. The objective sounded clean on paper. Escort a local informant, retrieve data, exfil before dusk. Clean missions were lies people told themselves to sleep. Calderon leaned against a table, calm as ever, catching her eye once and giving a small nod. It said, "Pay attention." She already was. The ridge to the north bothered her. Too quiet. Too perfect. Convoy wheels rolled at noon. Heat shimmered, bending the horizon into a mirage. Elara rode in the second vehicle, ammo crates braced between her boots. She counted minutes, measured shadows, felt the wind shift against her cheek. When the first shot cracked, it came from where she'd warned them about. The lead vehicle lurched. Dust swallowed everything. Orders collided over the radio. Elara moved without waiting, shoving crates forward, calling out counts. Calderon covered her, rifle steady, face tight with focus. Harker barked commands that didn't fit the terrain. The informant screamed. Somewhere metal screamed back. They fought their way out, but not clean. A SEAL took shrapnel to the leg. Another lost his radio. Elara dragged a crate through smoke and felt something tear in her shoulder. She didn't stop. When it was over, the desert went eerily still, as if holding its breath. Harker blamed timing. Calderon said nothing in front of the team. Later, by the trucks, he spoke low. "You called that ridge?" Elara nodded, staring at her hands. "Next time," he said, not promising, "I'll back you louder." She believed him because he never exaggerated. That night, a dust storm rolled in, swallowing stars. Elara sat alone, cleaning grit from magazines, listening to the wind claw at the tents. She thought about the shot she hadn't taken. About how close the line felt. Fear pressed in, familiar and sharp. She used it. She always had. When the storm finally passed, the camp looked smaller, more fragile. Harker announced another run in 48 hours. Same corridor. Same ridge. Elara's stomach tightened. She wrote a note with precise distances and sight lines and left it on Calderon's crate. He read it. He didn't throw it away. Dawn came thin and cold, a pale wash over the sand. Elara loaded crates in silence, every movement deliberate, as if ritual could hold chaos at bay. Calderon met her beside the truck, eyes rimmed with fatigue. He handed her a small, battered range card. "For luck," he said, almost shy. It held scribbled notes, wind holds, elevation clicks, distances he'd memorized. A sniper's language. Her throat tightened. "You trust me?" she asked. He studied her a beat. "I trust what you see," he said. Then he climbed into the lead vehicle. The corridor narrowed as they advanced, walls of rock rising on either side like clenched fists. Radios hissed. Tires crunched. Elara counted heartbeats. When the ambush sprang, it was perfectly timed, smoke to blind, suppressing fire to pin, movement on the ridge to kill. The world snapped into fragments. She dove, sliding behind the same burned-out Hilux from Chapter 1, adrenaline flooding her limbs. Harker shouted conflicting orders. Calderon sprinted, trying to flank. A burst caught him mid-step. He went down hard, rolling, rifle skittering into the open. The moment stretched. Elara saw the glint again. Saw the shooter shift. The range card burned in her pocket. She felt the old voice rise. Asterisk, not your job. Asterisk, another voice answered. Asterisk, if not you, then who? Asterisk, Harker yelled, "Give me the rifle." His hand reached. Elara stood. The rifle met her shoulder. The desert narrowed to a single breath. She fired. The ridge line jerked. A figure toppled. She fired again, then again, stitching calm through chaos. Each shot landed where the card said it would. The ambush faltered. The team surged. In the sudden quiet, only the wind moved. She dropped to Calderon's side. Blood soaked his vest. He gripped her wrist, eyes fierce. "You did good," he rasped. The medevac thumped in, scattering dust like rain. Harker stared at her, something cracked in his certainty. No one spoke on the ride back. At camp, the medics wheeled Calderon away. Elara stood alone, rifle heavy in her hands, knowing a line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. Night fell over Camp Rook like a black velvet curtain, heavy and suffocating. Elara sat atop a sand dune, rifle across her knees, watching fires flicker in the distance. The air still carried the sting of gunpowder and the metallic tang of blood. Calderon's voice lingered in her head. "You did good," but the words were fragile, like smoke slipping through fingers. She hadn't just survived. She had changed the mission, rewritten the rules of what she could, and would, do. The team didn't know yet, and maybe Harker never would. They would either see her as capable or dangerous. She wasn't sure which terrified her more. Back at the tents, whispers twisted around her. Some praised, some doubted. Harker's gaze sliced sharper than bullets, lingering on her every move. The camp's rhythm shifted. Every convoy, every movement carried new scrutiny. She noticed the fear in the younger runners' eyes, the ones who had never seen a woman take control under fire. She swallowed hard, feeling a hollow pride. Was it bravery or reckless defiance? She couldn't tell. Her nights were restless, haunted by every face on the ridge, every twitch that could have been fatal. She cleaned the rifle meticulously, imagining every bullet flying true, as if each shot erased the memory of powerlessness she had carried all her life. Calderon returned from the medevac 2 days later, walking slowly, cradling his left arm in a sling. He didn't speak at first, just nodded when he saw her on the dune. That single gesture held more weight than any lecture or praise. "You're ready," he said quietly, almost ashamed of the pride he felt. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Harker's contempt simmered in every brief interaction. Snaps of orders, sharp glares, but she felt a strange calm. The rifle was no longer just a tool, it was an extension of her body, her mind, her will. She knew deep down that this moment, this choice, had already begun to define who she was becoming. Sleep didn't come. She imagined the ridge, the glint of a sniper, the perfect line of sight. Her chest tightened with a mix of exhilaration and guilt. She had been invisible for too long, and now visibility carried responsibility she had never asked for but could no longer avoid. Every decision, every breath, weighed heavier in the desert night. Shadows whispered. Winds carried secrets. And somewhere deep inside, a voice said, "This is just the beginning." The desert was merciless that morning, baking under a sun that seemed determined to expose everything. Elara moved alone, the rifle cradled in her arms, eyes scanning every ridge, every boulder. Calderon had trusted her with observation duties before, but this time it was different. She was the point of the operation. She wasn't just supporting, she was leading in the shadows. Each footstep was deliberate, each breath measured, the rifle's weight grounding her as fear and anticipation warred in her chest. The wind carried distant voices, whispers of an enemy she couldn't see yet, and she felt the familiar tightening in her stomach. Focus sharpened into a blade. Hours passed in tense silence. She found a vantage atop a fractured outcrop, the sun catching dust motes like gold in her scope. Movement appeared, a convoy approaching along a dry riverbed, 3 figures scouting ahead. Harker's voice crackled faintly over the radio, giving orders she had already anticipated. Elara ignored him, eyes locked on her targets. Finger poised, she felt the old surge of adrenaline, the same rush when Calderon had fallen, but this time tempered with control. Each breath was a count, each heartbeat a metronome. The first shot flew almost without thought, cutting the lead scout in half, the bullet echoing like judgment across the valley. The other 2 froze, disoriented, then collapsed in quick succession, as if the desert itself had struck them down. By the time Harker arrived with the team, the convoy was silent, and the enemy bodies lay in stark relief against the pale sand. He stared at her, jaw tight, fury and awe clashing in his eyes. Calderon's old nod from the previous mission echoed in her mind. She didn't celebrate. She didn't need to. Every shot had carried weight, every bullet a message she was only just beginning to understand. Power could be claimed, responsibility could be earned, and courage wasn't a gift, it was a choice. When the team returned to base, whispers swirled faster than the desert winds. Some called her a hero, others muttered warnings about overstepping. Elara understood both. She had crossed lines others feared to approach. But as she cleaned the rifle that evening, sunlight fading to bruised purple over the dunes, she realized the real battle wasn't the enemy, it was the part of herself that had doubted her all along. That part had fallen silent. The morning fog clung to the desert like a shroud, muffling movement and amplifying tension. Elara moved among the tents, rifle slung low, aware of every glance, every whispered word. Harker's contempt had become more than subtle. He questioned her judgment at every turn, redirected her orders, and scrutinized her scope like it might bite. Calderon had warned her once, quietly, "Some people can't see what you're capable of until it hits them square in the chest." She understood now what he meant. The team was fractured, loyalty split between fear, respect, and old hierarchies. The new mission demanded infiltration along a canyon corridor known to be mined and watched. Elara led the observation team, peering through heat waves that distorted the landscape like a mirage. Every rock, every shadow seemed alive. She noticed small details, broken twigs, displaced sand, glinting metal, that Harker overlooked in his rush. By the time the enemy patrol appeared, she had already predicted their route. A single, precise shot disabled their communications, leaving them disoriented. A second and third took out their lead scouts before the team even fired a round. Harker stormed over after the engagement, voice sharp, anger uncontrolled. "You acted without orders," he snapped. Elara didn't flinch. "I acted with results," she said evenly, voice calm as the desert wind. The words hung in the air, echoing across the canyon. Behind her, the younger runners looked on with awe, eyes wide. Calderon appeared silently, arm in a sling, but his presence carried the weight of approval. Harker's face twitched, torn between outrage and grudging recognition. That night, Elara sat alone, rifle across her knees, listening to the hum of generators and distant patrols. She realized that victory carried isolation. Her choices had elevated her, yes, but they had also made her visible in ways that carried danger, not just from the enemy but from those who feared her power. She cleaned the rifle meticulously, each stroke a meditation, each click of the bolt a silent affirmation. She had earned this and no one could take it from her. And yet, as sleep threatened, her thoughts returned to Calderon's words, echoing through memory. Responsibility isn't taken, it's carried. The burden was heavy, but she had accepted it. The desert whispered promises of trials yet to come. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another challenge waited, and Elara felt the familiar surge. The heartbeat of a sniper, steady, unbroken, ready for the storm ahead. The sun beat down on the canyon floor like a hammer, relentless and unforgiving. Elara advanced with her team in tight formation, scanning every crevice, every overhang. The intel had been precise. An enemy communications hub hidden among jagged rocks, lightly guarded, supposedly a soft target. But something felt wrong. The wind carried faint echoes of movement, too subtle for Harker to notice, but sharp enough for her trained eyes. She signaled the team to halt, pressing herself against the canyon wall. Sweat stung her eyes, dust clung to her lips, but her mind was clear. This is a setup, she thought. Minutes later, the first shot rang out, not from the expected ridge but from behind. A burst of automatic fire sent rocks skittering across the sand like hail. Harker's men dove for cover, yelling into radios that were already static. Elara's instincts snapped into place. She rolled forward, rifle ready, scanning the canyon walls. Every shot she took found its mark, enemy patrols frozen, rifles smoking, their chaos amplified by the tight canyon walls. Calderon shouted from behind, his voice strained but steady, directing cover fire. The team rallied around her, their trust growing in real time as bullets whined past, kicking up dust in every direction. Harker appeared at the edge of cover, jaw tight, shaking. "Stop, she's too close," he barked, but Elara didn't flinch. She fired again, each shot deliberate, precise. The enemy faltered, confusion splintering their formation. Calderon's hand touched her shoulder briefly, an unspoken acknowledgement of control. Elara's pulse was steady now, calm amid chaos. She wasn't just defending, she was leading, shaping the battlefield with every decision. By the time the dust settled, the canyon was silent except for distant groans and the hum of the desert wind. Harker's glare was cold, his ego bruised. The team, however, looked at Elara with something like reverence. Calderon leaned close, whispering, "You kept them alive. And yourself too." She nodded, finally letting a fraction of the adrenaline drain. The trap had been real, lethal, and she had turned it inside out. The burden of visibility weighed on her still, but now it felt like armor. For the first time she understood that the rifle she carried wasn't just a weapon, it was her voice. And she was ready to speak. The sky was bruised purple and gold, heavy with the promise of dusk, when the final operation began. Elara crouched atop the ridge, rifle balanced, eyes scanning every jagged shadow. The enemy had regrouped, a small but lethal unit moving fast through the canyon below. This was no minor skirmish, this was the moment that would test everything she had learned, everything Calderon had quietly taught her, and every ounce of courage she carried. The desert wind whistled in her ears, carrying the scent of dust and gun oil. Her pulse was calm, steady, a rhythm she controlled. Below, the enemy moved in tight formation, unaware they were being watched. Elara's team advanced behind her, every step synchronized. Harker barked orders over the radio, but she ignored them, her focus narrowed to the scope and the target. Her first shot rang out, precise and quiet, dropping the lead scout. The others froze, confusion rippling through their ranks. She fired again, a second and third shot, each connecting exactly as she predicted. The canyon erupted in chaos. Explosions echoed off the rocks, dust and debris clouding vision. The enemy tried to flank, but Elara anticipated every move, adjusting aim, directing her team, every shot calculated, every breath deliberate. Calderon appeared at her side, arm in a sling, whispering, "You've got this." She nodded, eyes never leaving the field. She wasn't afraid. Fear had become a tool, a lens through which she judged every movement. Harker, for all his experience, couldn't keep pace with her intuition, her timing, her ability to command the battlefield from a distance. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the enemy was defeated or scattered. The team exhaled, adrenaline leaving them in heavy, shaky waves. Elara lowered the rifle, feeling the weight settle, not oppressive now but familiar, earned. When the dust cleared, the desert was silent except for the hum of generators and the distant cries of victory. Calderon's eyes met hers, pride shining through the scars of battle. Harker didn't speak, couldn't. He had been bested not by luck but by skill, instinct, and courage. Elara realized in that moment that she had crossed a threshold. She was no longer just the runner, the support. She was a sniper, a leader, a force that could turn the tide of any battlefield. And in that realization she felt a fierce, unshakable freedom. The rifle wasn't just in her hands, it was part of her. And the woman holding it was unstoppable. The desert at dawn was quiet, almost reverent, as if it knew the battle was over. Elara sat atop the ridge, rifle resting across her knees, eyes tracing the horizon where the sun painted sand and rock in gold and shadow. Camp Rook below was stirring, teams moving, trucks rolling, the hum of generators. But for the first time Elara felt truly untouchable, anchored not by fear but by experience and choice. Calderon approached slowly, arms still in a sling, his gaze steady. "You changed everything," he said softly. She didn't answer at once, letting the weight of silence hold the moment, letting the rifle feel like an extension of herself rather than a weapon. Harker appeared last, his expression unreadable. For once words failed him. He had followed protocol, training and rules, and yet she had rewritten them all. No arrogance, no flash, just calm precision and unshakable judgment. Elara didn't gloat. She simply lowered the rifle, cleaned it, and placed it across her lap. The burden of responsibility was still there, but it felt lighter now, like a promise she could carry forward. The younger runners watched from below, wide-eyed, understanding that power was not given, it was earned, defended, and mastered. A final report came in, all enemy positions neutralized, no team casualties. Elara exhaled, feeling every muscle loosen, every heartbeat settle into rhythm. Calderon touched her shoulder, pride and relief in his quiet gesture. "You were ready long before anyone else realized it," he said. The words were enough. She had stepped out of invisibility, survived chaos, and transformed fear into mastery. The desert wind carried away the echoes of gunfire, leaving only the hum of life returning, of stories yet to be told. Elara rose, the rifle over her shoulder, scanning the horizon one last time. She wasn't the same girl who had carried ammunition, waiting to be noticed. She was a sniper, a leader, a force of precision and calm in a world designed to test her at every turn. As the sun climbed higher, burning the sand gold, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The ridge, the desert, the battlefield, everything had tested her and everything had shaped her. She was ready for whatever came next, because the last shot she had taken wasn't just for the mission, was for herself.